Good morning. I don't know whether you stopped to take in what the Bible verses that we have each term are, but the Bible verse for this term is, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." And today's hero is a very good example of that. When I heard that the series was going to be about unlikely heroes, I immediately thought of Gideon. There's much about Gideon's character which I can easily identify with. God saw the potential in Gideon well before Gideon had any confidence that he could do anything. If we go back to this series after Christmas, I may bring a second talk about Gideon, because I had lots of thoughts about Gideon. The first half, which I'll bring today, is about God using God's strength rather than your own weakness. And then the second one that I have thoughts about is about seeking God's will. Gideon was a man who had little confidence in himself, but God was still able to use him. God used him anyway, and he brought Israel victory against their enemies. As someone who regularly battles against self-confidence, Gideon gives me hope. Gideon was a man who often struggled to trust God. He needed numerous reassurances from God. If you read through the story, you hear God's very gracious to him as he encourages him on. Starts with small things and goes on to the big final conclusion, where God leads him to defeat their enemies. When the Israelites moved into Canaan, God warned them about the danger of intermingling with the local population and their evil practices. And he warned them specifically that he would have to turn his back on them if they turned their back on him. He would have to withdraw his blessing if they forgot about him. But the Israelites didn't listen to this. They were very soon worshipping the Canaanite gods rather than the God who'd led them out of slavery, the God who'd provided for them. But when the Israelites did repent of their selfish rebellion, God helped them. He raised up leaders called judges, who would rid them of the self-made trouble that they brought onto themselves. There's a whole book called Judges, which gives these stories, and Gideon is one of these heroes who God raised up. Before God raised Gideon up, the Israelites had been, in this particular story, the Israelites had been plagued by their enemies for 7 consecutive years. Every year, the Israelites would plant grain and they'd tend it, look after it, they'd harvest it, and just then, when they were going to reap the reward of their labours, just when they'd collected the harvest, the Midianites would come. They'd come like a horde of locusts. They waited for the Israelites to do all the hard work, and then, when the Israelites should be reaping their reward, the Midianites came en masse to steal everything that they could find. It was more demoralising year on year. Every year it got worse, and the Israelites' ability to defend themselves was weakened every year. The Midianites stole their weapons, they raped their women, they taunted them, they grew weaker, and the Israelites gradually despaired and lost hope. What was the point? God's abandoned us. The truth was that they had abandoned God. Eventually, the Israelites were almost starving, and it was then that they remembered God. All too often, we need pain to remind us of God. It's a sad truth. So the Israelites did eventually cry out to God, and of course, God was eagerly waiting to help them. God doesn't waste his energy on people who don't want his help. If you ignore God, do your own thing, then God won't stop you. But don't expect God's help if you're living a selfish life. Equally, if you think that just because you're obeying the rules, that God is duty-bound to bless you, then it doesn't work that. God is not transactional. You're much more likely to get blessed if you're obeying God's rules, but it's not a done deal, whatever prosperity teachers will tell you. All God promises to do is to help you through anything that you face. Anyway, let's look at Gideon's story. It says that the angel of the Lord visited Gideon while he was hiding in a winepress, threshing wheat. You need wind to blow the chaff away as you're threshing. And if you're in the bottom of a winepress, hidden away, then there's not going to be no wind. So it's a far from ideal situation. Gideon's main concern here was that he was wanting to thresh his wheat in a place where the Midianites wouldn't see him. He didn't want them to spot and steal his labours. So this was not a bold activity, what he was doing. Gideon must have been shocked when suddenly someone speaks to him. And he was even more shocked by what this person said to him. Gideon had no idea who this person was that spoke to him. But it says that the angel came out with this statement. He said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." Gideon must have wondered, what's this guy smoking? He probably looked over his shoulder to see if there was someone behind him. But the angel was referring to him. This guy wasn't an idiot, even though it didn't make sense. Gideon responded with sarcasm. Years of Midianite aggression and opposition had sapped Gideon of any optimism. He'd lost hope in God rescuing the Israelites again. Let's read this passage together. It's in Judges 6. So starting at verse 11. It says, "Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Orpha, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, 'Mighty hero, the Lord is with you.' 'Sir,' Gideon replied, 'if the Lord's with us, then why has all this happened to us? Where are all the miracles that our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites.' But then the Lord turned to him and said, 'Go with the strength that you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you.'" Do you hear that? It says, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you." Those are key words. But Gideon says, "But Lord, how can I rescue Israel? My clan's the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I'm the least in my entire family." The Lord said to him, "I am with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man." Gideon was completely baffled by this statement. Why would the stranger call him mighty hero? He doubted God's ability to rescue the nation. Years of mockery from the more powerful Midianites had sapped him of his trust in God. It rings out in his sarcasm. The miracles of Egypt seemed an eternity ago. Where was this miracle-working God just when they needed him? But listen to the reply that that this angel told him. It said, God was with him. The angel said, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I'm sending you." So that's the key part of the statement. I'm with you. Gideon was beginning to realise that he was not talking to an ordinary person. We're told that this is the angel of the Lord, and some believe that this is an earlier appearance of Jesus. It makes sense from what the things he says. I am with you. I will be with you. Gideon was not thinking about who he was conversing of. He couldn't look beyond his own lack of confidence. And he said, why me? How can I rescue Israel? He says, my clan's the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I'm the least in the entire family. According to Gideon, he was the least in his family of a weak clan, and then he was from Manasseh. Even Manasseh was a weak tribe that was looked down upon. When you read in Genesis about when Jacob was blessing his sons, Joseph had 2 sons that were brought before Jacob to be blessed. Now, Joseph brought Manasseh, the older son, in front of him and put him on his left side so that he would get a blessing from the right hand, which was the more important hand. And with Ephraim was on the right to get the blessing from the left hand. And it says that Jacob crossed his hands over and blessed the younger son. There's a lot of that blessing of the younger son in these early stories of Genesis. So even Manasseh was an overlooked tribe. And in Gideon's own eyes, he was a nothing, a nobody. But you know what? God delights in using nobodies. There are those who feel that their nobodies are not full of their own importance. And they're much more likely to listen to God because they need his strength. They can't do it on their own, so they're much more likely to be available and trust God to ask for his help to do things beyond their own strength. The Bible is full of weak, insignificant people who God has used to do great tasks. That's what this series is about, and that's why I'm up here facing my fear, standing in front of you. 1 Corinthians 1 verse 27 says, "But God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong." Gideon's weakness was what God was able to harness to do great things. Gideon's lack of faith in his own ability was what God used to do amazing things. The climax of Gideon's story was how he gathered a large army of many thousands of Israelites to tackle their enemies. Judges 7, I won't read it all because it's a long tale there, but read it for yourself. It tells us about how Gideon's large Israelite army got whittled down to just 300 men. They had a vast, powerful army of enemies to face. There were Midianites and Amalekites and all sorts of other eastern allies that had come in to rub the Israelites' noses in it in a big way. They were there to humiliate Israel like more than ever before. Chapter 7 verse 2 says, "The Lord said to Gideon, 'You've got too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, then the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength.'" God didn't want any doubt about how this victory was won. Gideon's victory was one of the victories where the enemy destroyed itself while the Israelites watched on. It was a cunning plan which God had inspired Gideon to do. The 300 remaining soldiers split into 3 groups. They snuck up around the camp of this massed enemy in the dark with hidden torches, and then they made a noise and a light and shouted for a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. And then in the dark, this multitude of amalgamated enemies was thrown into utter confusion as they heard danger all around them. In their sudden panic, they turned and attacked each other. Their size and their difference was their own downfall. They'd come en masse to demonstrate to Israel their strength, only to have that turned against them. This is how God works. Man thinks that he's got it all worked out. Mankind thinks that he's so clever that he doesn't need God's help anymore. In today's world, science and wisdom try to tell us that we don't need God anymore. This so-called miracle working God that we were told fairy stories about in our childhood, we don't need him. Mankind can do very well without God, is what the world around us says. I don't know about you. I've had moments when I doubted God. I've said that before. Times when God seemed distant, when blessings seemed a long time ago. I can understand Gideon's frustrated rant at the angel. Where are you, God? Where is God? What's he doing? Life can feel like a pile of poo. You can easily forget that God does passionately care about you. He wants to help you. Your problems can appear too great for God to sort out. But if you listen to the lyrics of some of the songs this morning, they aren't. You won't find hope in this world. We're in a selfish, cruel, nasty place. I've had times in the past where I've despaired of this world. I've concentrated on the bleak things that the world shows, and I've had many dark thoughts. Thankfully, I'm free of that a lot of the time now. And has the world changed? No. If anything, it gets worse all the time. My hope and the optimism that I do find is through Jesus. I have to limit how much news I listen to because it isn't encouraging. But I can't switch off from the world. I do try and keep up to date with what's happening, but I don't get sucked into the discouraging details. I regularly remind myself that God does care for me. Gratitude is a huge part of my healing and my peace. I have an awful lot of blessing to thank God for. Britain, for instance, is a flawed place, but it's still a rich nation. Why are so many trying to join us here? Britain is a good place to live. There's so many places worse off than here. I've got a beautiful family. It has its problems and stresses like any family, but I'm blessed with a beautiful family. I have a new career in the school that I have to thank God for. I was in a job that was very increasingly stressful, but now I'm at a school where I enjoy helping people. I try to make a positive difference to the school that I'm working in now. None of us here are particularly rich. You can easily see people around you who've got much more. You're probably not as successful as you hope to be, but comparison and competitiveness are not healthy. Our world around us is materialistic. The world's fickle is an unfair place, where being at the right time and the right place is what determines whether you're noticed and applauded or not. The world applauds celebrities. It encourages you to fight your way to the top. And it celebrates strength. But don't waste your time and thought, your energy on all this vanity. Yes, you will find brief satisfaction from anything this world offers, but it won't last for very long. It promises much, it whets your appetite, but all too quickly you're longing for the next fix of whatever it is that becomes your addiction. We should be finding our satisfaction in God, not seeking our own pleasure and ease. We need to seek God and serve those around us. It goes completely against the Western world around us, but this is what God urges us to do. This is God's way. It's the opposite to our world. God delights in weakness. We need to get to the end of our own ability and strength and acknowledge our dependence on God. Proverbs 3 says, Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all these ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. And then you will win favour and a good name in the sight of God and man. As I've said, I hope to talk more about how God led Gideon in the next talk. But very briefly, I'll say God led Gideon to do something illogical. He got rid of nearly all his army. So does this mean that we should look for the stupidest solution and then boldly go ahead and have faith that God is leading us? No, that's not faith. Faith is often illogical, but it's never stupid. God does expect us to use our brains when we move forward in faith. Faith is not naivety. We just need to boldly step forward towards something if we feel God guiding us. But we shouldn't do it if it's stupid. Please continue to use the brain that God's blessed you with. God is creative, and faith requires God-inspired imagination. One of the key features about God's guidance that I just mentioned today is that what you do should be done lovingly. Above all, God is love. And God will not lead you to do something that's unkind or in an unloving way. When you're seeking God's way forward, look for the fruit of the Spirit in it. And of course, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If it's not in that manner, then please stop. But as I was thinking about that, I thought about today's story. The main storyline today is about God leading a guy to kill thousands of men. How on earth is that loving? But then thinking about the context of the story, who were these men that died? They were cruel oppressors who delighted in getting their yearly ready meal prepared by the hard labours of the Israelites. They were nasty, selfish, arrogant tormentors who delighted in doing evil. And how did they die? Mostly by their own hands. They turned on each other in their panicked response to Gideon's danger signals. Sometimes being hard is the kindest option. These tyrants would not change their ways, and they had to be removed for the general good. God is a God of justice as well as love. James 4 tells us a key to success. It says, I say it again, if you want to be a friend of the world, you'll make yourself an enemy of God. Do you think that the scripture has no meaning? They say that God is passionate and that his spirit he has placed within you should be faithful to him. But he gives grace generously. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. That's quoting Proverbs 3. It says, carrying on in James, it says, so humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come close to God, and God will come close to you. And then a bit further on it says, humble yourselves before the Lord. He will lift you up in honour. So, basically what I'm trying to say today are these things. Keep your eyes on God, especially when he seems quiet and distant. He is there. And then the key thing of this talk is God delights in using the weak, those who don't rely on their own ability. Then don't doubt what God can do through you. Your weakness is his strength. All you need is willingness. You've heard me say this many times. Faith is spelt T-R-Y. Again, use your brain, but be willing to do something a bit odd if you feel that God is leading you. And then make sure that you pray to God and seek God for what you're doing, that you're doing it lovingly. So the questions for our groups now. A famous one is what stood out for you most today? Then, do you find it easy to trust God that he has everything under control? And then thirdly, explain how your weakness has actually become a strength.